For lots of people, the answer to their health and well-being needs isn't medicine, or certainly not just medicine. Healthcare professionals now prescribe a range of social and physical activities to their patients, as it's been shown that there are huge benefits to emotional, mental, and physical quality of life. For example, volunteering, arts, cultural groups, gardening and nature-based activities, cookery, social groups, as well as physical activity are all options that might be suitable for someone who wants to feel better. Usually, there's someone whose role it is to help the individual find something that's right for them in their local area. This might be a health advisor, community connector, or link worker. They use their local knowledge alongside posters, leaflets, and the internet to find relevant opportunities in their area. But this method is time-consuming, and information can quickly go out of date. The link worker might know the right place, but not have all the details of what sessions are being run at their fingertips. We know that less active people stand to gain a huge benefit from just a small amount of regular activity. So how can we help link workers access the information they need to make the biggest impact? This is where open data could help. Open data is information that anyone can access, use, and share. For example, data published by sports centers, community groups, and local organizations about activities they run, including the date, time, and venue the session takes place, as well as information about who it is for and if there is a cost. This means that organizations delivering physical activity opportunities can upload their sessions just once to an open data-enabled system. These systems then publish this data in a standardized open data format, meaning many different websites or the systems used by link workers can pull in and display that information. Imagine a live feed of up-to-date local opportunities which a link worker can explore with someone who's been referred. For activity providers, it's an easy way to promote their session to a new audience, and link workers get access to a fuller picture of local activities. But this all relies on good quality information about the sessions being published as open data, and then being used to help an individual find something that's right for them. That's what we've been exploring in a project working closely with link workers and activity providers. Download the report to read more.
So hopefully that gives you a useful and concise overview of the project, or certainly the context for it. I'm now going to hand you over to Chris Norfield, who's led the implementation of this work, to give an overview of the research phase. Remember to do use Slido if questions come up as Chris goes through the findings. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Hi, everyone. So as Tim said, when we shifted this to a kind of very sort of research and development project, the first thing that we wanted to do was really get an in-depth understanding from link workers about their experience of supporting service users into physical activity sessions. And what we really wanted to understand was, I guess, what that was like for them, what that was like for the users, and how we could potentially better support them to link people into those local activity opportunities. So in the first phase, we worked with 9 different referral services. So we found kind of 7 different boroughs in London who were interested in partnering with us. And those referral services they varied from social prescribing services, which were could be in a small GP setting with just 1 or 2 people, to programs with a number of paid staff, and also things such as kind of healthy lifestyle referral services. So it wasn't all social prescribing, and there was a mixture of people who would be classed as link workers or community connectors. But all of these people were having conversations with less active people. And what we found was actually a proportion of the people they were talking to were exactly the kind of people who could really benefit from accessing sport and physical activity opportunities in their local area. So from these 9 organisations, we put a call out to get some link workers involved. And on the next slide, we'll see that we had 25 different link workers coming forward in the project. We ran 3 workshops with them, all virtually over sort of December and January. And we also had 6 different activity providers joining. And this was a really good interactive way of trying to draw out what that experience was like. So we talked to them about the archetype type of people who were accessing their service and their user journeys, really trying to understand, I guess, what proportion of people who they were seeing were actually interested and ready and suitable to go on and join activity, and what role physical activity played in them delivering their their actual role to support people with their health and well-being. And then we looked kind of behind the scenes. What was the information they needed to do that well? What were the tools that they used in terms of the digital tools or the kind of practical things that enabled them to do that? So on the next slide, we'll see that the kind of outputs from those 3 sessions and the work that we did with those services were 2 things. So one was what we called 11 unmet needs. So these were essentially themes that came out from all of these discussions, which we grouped together and identified 11 areas where actually, if you were delivering these kind of services in the local area, if you were looking at focusing on these, they might have a potential benefit in terms of improving the links to local activity opportunities. And then we also came up with a blueprint. So this was an aggregated view of what that user journey was like. So across all the different services, there were lots of differences, but what were the commonalities around how did a user first come to talk to a link worker? How did the issue of physical activity get raised, at what point, and how suitable was it? And then how did it actually happen if a signposting or a referral happened to local activities, and what was the long-term outcome? So both those documents are on our website and available for you to download. I'm just going to go into a little bit more depth on the 11 unmet needs, because that's one of the areas that we think was possibly the most interesting and came out of this project as something which could be used in a much broader setting than our very specific aims, which is around how we could use open data to solve this. So the 11 theme areas that came up kind of range across from things such as link workers needing the latest local information to hand, and through to the kind of idea of we need a warm handover. So we as a link worker don't want to just pass someone on and leave them to join an activity. Actually, we want to be with them every step of the way and support them to get there. We go on the next slide. I can just highlight a couple of the others and the information that we got for each of them. So for example, virtual taster. You'll see this is a slide from the document that we've published. Link workers told us that they really want to know what the actual experience of attending a physical activity class would be like prior to taking part. So who is in the group? What is the level of activity? What does it feel like? And they said, you know what, posters and documents about the activities that are happening, which just say, join our yoga class, it's on Tuesday at the community centre. They don't do a good enough job of really bringing to life what it would be like for that service user to attend. And they felt that actually if there was a way to digitally or virtually kind of really show what it would be like to attend that class, that would help them in those discussions in helping service users find something that's right for them. And then an example of another one that we looked at was around the need for social referrals. So again, link workers told us that the major benefit of being referred into and sticking with physical activity was that social aspect. And it came across really importantly that whilst we are we're funded around physical activity, and the work that we were looking at in terms of open active data was specifically around sport and physical activity, really it was a kind of a clear flag to us that going forward, this needs to not just be a sport, a physical activity thing. It really is the activity in the end of the day doesn't really matter. It is just the opportunity to bring together people and to make connections. And the activity is just a kind of a facilitator of that. So really making sure that is considered in all the work going forward. So as I said, those 11 unmet needs are available to download, and yeah, we'll have a slight discussion later about those. So once we'd conducted the research and we come up with the unmet needs, we then wanted to start and actually focus this back in on what we were funded to do, which is looking at how open data could potentially address some of the issues and make it easier for link workers to signpost or to refer people into local activities. So what we did is we took those 11 unmet needs and we ran a workshop with 10 companies who currently delivered systems or platforms that referral services used. So if you think about like a case management system, so if a link worker has a number of people who've been referred to them and they are working with them and they are communicating and they're managing their caseload, then actually those systems, we really wanted to say, how could we help you to integrate open data into those systems so that the link workers had an up-to-date information about local activities at their fingertips, and really importantly, looking at these unmet areas of need, what functionality might they need to find something that's right for that person to really support that. So we developed some example ideas to go with this. So we took the unmet needs and we created a problem statement. So the first unmet need was around the need for the latest local information. So we then kind of flipped that to specifically say, well, how could open data improve that process of collating and verifying local activity information? And we did some ideation sessions and came up with some examples. The one here is around the idea of kind of blue tick verifying sessions. So if you've got a big long list of activities going on, what is the information that a link worker may need to be able to distinguish between them and pick out, actually, this activity is going to be really right for this person. And we came up with a number of ideas about how a solution could do that. Then we presented those ideas to the systems, and we did an open funding round where we then asked them to come up with suggestions about how they might implement them. And I think that was really important to ensure that the stuff that came forward wasn't just the ideas that we'd come up with from the research. It was actually things that the referral systems felt would be usable in their system going forward and would have a kind of a real benefit and a possible life beyond the project. So as a result of that, we funded 5 different companies who had all got projects in partnership with link worker systems across London. And at that point, we also published an interim report, which kind of goes into detail about the unmet needs and how we turn those into ideas. So that was the end of our kind of iteration session. And again, just a quick reminder, I want to go on Slido if you've got any questions and pop those in. Once the programs had got funding, we then had a relatively short period of time for them to develop the systems and test them. So really they were developing an integration of open data. So most of the systems hadn't got open data in their system at the moment. Most of the existing referral systems relied on local knowledge, a development worker going out and kind of collecting posters and leaflets and typing it into the system and trying to keep that as an up-to-date record of what was happening locally. So the first thing was to integrate open data, so a live feed of local activities that were coming through. The second thing was then developing these kind of functional elements that would help a link worker to really kind of filter out and pick out the key things to help them when they're talking to a service user find the right thing. So we asked 2 questions. So one was, does an open data powered solution make it easier for link workers or service users to find an activity session? And then ultimately, does the open data powered solution lead to more service users taking up those physical activity opportunities? And we kind of then posed that hypothesis, which is, we think using open data to provide a live feed of relevant activity opportunities, which a link worker or service user can filter and use to find something that's right for them, will increase the quality of referrals and also the quantity of those. And that's what we set to learn from the project. So the 5 projects that we funded, I'm going to run through a quick example for each of them, and each of them we've got a small little video that hopefully just brings to life what they did. And again, each of them is kind of quite different settings, and we'll go through them one by one now. So the first one was Digital Co-Production, who worked with Waltham Forest, and so they had an activity finder system that link workers or referral services can use to find activities that were going. And they looked at integrating open data into that and also doing a couple of functional developments to really, as I said, make it easy to find the right thing. And I'll hand over to Ian from Digital Co-Production to present that.
My name is Ian Singleton. Welcome to this very short presentation of the work that we carried out with 2 social prescribing link workers at 2 PCNs in the Waltham Forest area. That's Central Walthamstow and South Leytonstone. They are working with pre-diabetic and diabetes patients, and part of their work is to encourage take-up of physical activity. So our aim was to use OpenActive to make this more efficient and easier for the PCN social prescribing link worker, but also to improve the chances of take-up of activities by the patient. I'm going to get straight into the demo due to time constraints, but a fuller video is available on our website for you to have a look at. So here's our main screen, designed for a social prescriber link worker to be having a conversation with a patient and complete their needs and circumstances in order to match to appropriate activities. Obviously, I don't have time to show everything, so I'm going to focus on two issues to show what we have developed with London Sport and the two PCNs. The first issue is that patients don't always know what activity they are after. So we've developed a configurable pathways option where the link worker will define the sort of activity that might be appropriate to the types of patient they have, and then these will be at the touch of a button. We've also created an activity context, so whilst they might not know exactly what activity they want, they probably will know what intensity level they want, or whether it should be indoors or outdoors, or part of a team or not, or whether they need a facilitator on site. You can also see that we have implemented Waltham Forest quality assurance. This is called the feel-good model. And if this is ticked, this will ensure that only safeguarded activities are shown to patients. We've also provided an option to choose a place which a patient might be comfortable getting to. Maybe it's close to home or on a bus route or somewhere they visit regularly, and they will only see activities that are close to this. And finally, they can add when they might be available, as we know that they're likely to have very busy life schedules. All of this supports our vision of getting the right information to meet the right personal needs. The second issue is that the patient needs to have access to the activity information. You can see here that we are adding activities to favourites, but then have the option to send it as an email by simply pasting it into a normal patient's email, and it will show links to each of those activities' full details. We can also choose to send it as a link through a messenger app, say Facebook or WhatsApp, and the patient will get to view the favourites that you have set up for them. They then have their own option whether to print it out or not. Our vision is to give access to the right local support information at the right time for the right place and to meet the right needs. And hopefully that will improve a person's quality of life. Sorry, this is very short and sweet, but hopefully it was useful. Thank you for listening.
And then the second project that we funded was Heleum and the Bromley by Bow Centre. So Heleum had an existing system. Again, it's a system that link workers could use to communicate with people who've been referred to them, and also a consumer-facing app, so something that people could use to find activities that were close to them. They focused quite a lot on the resources that were available and information, and they had some existing integrations where they could show activities that were happening. So as part of this, they looked at, again, the open data as a source of that information, but also, again, how can you make it more relevant and give people the right information to be confident to attend. So I'll pass over here to Nimit, who talks through what that looks like in terms of how they integrated open active data into their app.
The next few screens are examples of the patient view of the mobile app. These are the ways how patients can search for services, for example, cycling, as you can see in the search bar. There are services that patients can search themselves, or there are services that show up that have been sent to them, particularly by the link workers. This is an example of how the service looks when you click on it. You can see the title and image, the activity when it was last updated by the service provider. You can also view the website, see how far it is from you, and the unique feature is that you can open in Google Maps and get directions from where you are right now. There's a little description at the bottom that you can also read to see what is required for the service and what you will be experiencing at the service.
So that green light there was essentially the blue tick verification idea that we'd come up with at the start. So showing when the activity was last updated, hopefully giving a little bit of confidence to the user about actually this activity is likely to be happening. And then the Google Maps integration was, again, addressing one of those unmet needs about how do you make it really easy for people to find and get to those activities. So the third project that we funded was NHS Connect, and this was run by Healthplace and working in partnership with Westminster. Again, Healthplace was an existing website where people can go to find local support, and there are many China GPs and health systems who are signposting to this at the moment. What they did is they worked with our tech partners, IMIN, to integrate a feed of open data into that system, and then to develop a guided set of questions to help people find the right activity. And I'll hand over to Matthew from Healthplace to explain how that looked.
Been given funding by London Sport to develop a new simple way for people to find out about opportunities for physical activity on their doorstep. And we've delivered this in partnership with IMEN, the experts in use of open active data. And simply, it works like this. People are being given funding by London Sport to develop a new, simple way for people to find out about opportunities for physical activity on their doorstep. And we've delivered this in partnership with IMEN, the experts in use of open active data. And simply, it works like this. People are invited to fill out a brief quiz. Takes little more than a minute to do this. They are asked to select one or more goals, one or more reasons for involving themselves in physical activity, for example, to improve mental well-being. They're then asked to add a location, Camden here as an example. Then to select their age band, for example, 49 to 64. They're then asked to select how intense or challenging the activity they want to be involved in, would be. This is particularly important for people with health issues who are starting out and will most certainly be interested in the low to moderate activity options. And of course, options which are either free, paid, or both. We then give people the option of adding personal details. Now, if they do this, we can then subsequently message people and ask them whether they've found support, found the support they want, or if not, why not, checking in on their progress on some of their personal goals. And then depending on that feedback, providing some new potential support opportunities. And then the results are displayed. As you see below, there are opportunities to select days in the week or time slots in the day there. And of course, in these socially distanced times in which we live, also to review opportunities for virtual activities. Online yoga is an example there. So briefly, we've been testing this interface with 54 clinicians, GPs, social prescribing link workers, and others. They've universally found it a very simple and intuitive interface. More than 80% have said that they're very likely to adopt this. And clinicians and exercise professionals have been particularly keen in the opportunities to develop new models of digitally enabled exercise on prescription. So if you're interested in hearing more, do get in touch, matthew@healthplace.io, and I'd be delighted to talk further. Thank you.
And again, another good example showing actually, one, the integration of open data to give a fuller picture of activities that were happening, but two, in that kind of that guided quiz, as Matthew calls it, looking at really what data is currently available in open data and actually pushing it to really understand what is the data that is needed. Is it around, as you say, intensity, matching activities to potential people's goals, and even matching activities to potential health conditions? How can the data that is provided in Open Active potentially be enhanced to better meet the needs of those who are working in link worker situations? The fourth project that we funded was Elemental, working with Enable Leisure and Culture in Wandsworth. So again, Elemental, a case management system that's kind of quite widely used in social prescription and other referral services. Again, traditionally, they will provide that list of local activities in their system based on the ground work, connections, posters, leaflets, internet research. And again, so this was specifically, again, working with IMEN. How can we bring in that information from Open Active as a live feed? And then how can the Elemental system be tweaked to make it really easy for the link workers to find what's going on. And I'll pass over to Alan, who's going to talk that through.
There are several ways in which a user can interact with the Elemental Directory services and access the classes supplied via the AIMN integration. The most common use case is when a link worker or social prescriber is with a client and building their social prescription. They will do this from within the case, where they can access social prescriptions and then click on Add Intervention to Case. This will bring up the Elemental Directory service, and we can see a tab along the top titled AIMN. If we click on this, we will have the services stored within AIMN, returned and displayed within Elemental. We can see a high-level overview of the services returned from AIMN, including title, cost, type, and distance from the client's location. The classes are sorted by this distance, and we can see this here. On the right-hand side, we can see a map with pins for each of the service. We can click on any of those pins, and we will see a title of that intervention, along with the venue on which it is hosted. Along the left-hand side, there is a list of categories, which will allow the user to look for more specific classes. If we know what the client is interested in, then we can filter the results. For example, aerobics and basketball. This will then filter the results displayed, and you can see on the map here, if we zoom out, we can see the services that are included within these two categories. We can then click on any of the classes for more information. So we can see here some description, the age range, some prices, as well as email addresses and any contact details. This information is dependent upon the information available from within the AIMN Directory service. On the top right-hand corner, we can see there's an option to add this to the case. So if we click on it and select signpost only, it will be added to the client's social prescription package within their case. We can see here now that aerobics has been added to this client's prescription. From here, we can also give a rating based on any client feedback. We can also add an outcome if they are no longer interested, or if they attended, or if it is no longer suitable. This information will also feed into the existing reports that are available to any customers. We're able to see the classes or interventions that are prescribed. We can also see the reasons for referral and the cases for which those classes were prescribed. You can see any ratings, any outcomes, and any signposted them, and some general demographic information. That's it for the AIMN integration as working with the Elemental platform.
And then the fifth project that we funded was slightly different. So it was still using open data. So Playways are a system who already use open data. They've been one of the founder partners of Open Active. So they have an activity finder that uses that information. But they partnered with London Borough, Barking and Dagenham to look at how could you best address that issue around virtual taster. So if a link worker and a service user are looking at the range of options that are available, how do they actually identify what is right for them? How do they get a better sense of what's happening? So what they did was they came up with a template for a welcome video that any activity provider could do. So it looked at introducing the type of activity, the instructor, some case studies about people who've taken part, and also looking at, I guess, how to get to the venue, parking, etc. So what they've done is actually create that in Canva as a free template that any activity provider could use. All they then need to do is film those 4 separate sections, and then you can just drag and drop it into the template, and then you've got a designed kind of ready to go video. So they also then worked with 24fit, and Kevin at 24fit did us a nice example video that we're just going to show now, which shows one of his pound sessions and how actually this video could be used when a link worker and a service user are exploring what's right for them. So I'll play that.
Hi, I'm Kev. I'm your instructor for this class. I love teaching Pound. It's great fun. It's very different to most other exercise classes. And it's really effective. It's got everything. It will strengthen your legs and your core, improve your flexibility and your balance, and burn lots of calories without impacting your knees. Also, rocking out to some great tracks puts you in a fabulous mood, not just during the class, but after it too. So when you get home, you'll be buzzing. We're a very friendly community group, and we'd love to welcome you to your first class and to experience the joys of Pound. You can try it for free, so no excuses. Hope to see you soon, Rockstar.
I love Pound because it's fun, it's loud, I get lost in the music, I forget that I'm exercising.
I love Pound, so you get to rock out.
It's a great stress buster.
I choose Pound because it's a fun workout and it makes me feel better about myself.
It's the only class that my teenage daughter agreed to do with me. It doesn't matter how I feel when I enter a Pound class, I know I always feel great when I've finished.
I choose Pound because it's fun and a great workout for both my body and mind.
This is Micklova Memorial Hall on Station Road in Micklova. If you come along Station Road from the centre of Micklova, then the Memorial Hall is just on your right, next to Sainsbury's. There's street parking on the roadside on Station Road to the side and to the front of the hall. Some more street parking on the left on Station Road and also down Park Road. Sainsbury's has its own car park, but it's just for their customers, so please don't use it. To get access into the hall, you actually use the side door. If you go through there, turn right, and then turn left into the main hall. If you're using the bus, catch the Micklova. The bus stop is up there about 100 yards, and on the opposite side of the road, it's about 50 yards away from the hall.
So this, for me, was one of the really, I guess, eye-opening things to come out of this project is thinking about, I guess, in some of my previous work in sports development and how big a barrier it is to get people to attend an actual class. Just that combination of meeting the instructor, seeing where the parking was, how to access, and just bringing that to life, I really think can be a sort of a very powerful way to help people who maybe lack confidence, and indeed many people lack confidence about joining new activities. So I think that's a really nice example of a way that we can potentially do that digitally. And then video is a property that can be pulled through in open data as well. So again, activity providers creating these, uploading them as open data, they can be pulled through into systems and used in those conversations. I think it's a really interesting thing that's come out of this. So those were the 5 projects that we funded. I know there's a couple of kind of tech difficulties with those videos. What we will be doing is we'll be sharing these slides afterwards. We're also putting all of these on our website, and over the next few weeks we'll be kind of doing case studies on each of these integrations. We'll include the videos within those, and again we'll include all the contact details of any, if you're interested in getting in touch with any of the projects to find out more about what they've been doing. So when we set out to fund those 5 projects, we asked them all to report back. We asked them all to kind of answer the question, is there a business case for using open data in referral settings currently? And we asked them to take feedback from kind of the tech system, how it worked with what they wanted to do, but also then to test that with link workers and understand from a link worker perspective, do these developments actually help us to address those? And then the second thing we asked them to do was actually look at kind of testing the functional elements. So in terms of summarizing the business case, we identified a number of kind of benefits that could potentially be accessed by using open data. So link workers told us that the open data powered solutions could really be a time saver. They could increase their efficiency greatly. We had one of the projects we're able to actually quantify that potentially link workers can save around 15 minutes per service user when recommending activities. And if you're thinking either in a setting where you've got multiple link workers with large caseloads, or something which was then being scaled across multiple regions, 15 minutes per service user can actually scale up to be quite a big time saver. Secondly, they talked about the ability to make better recommendations. So the idea that actually having a kind of a list that they can quickly browse through of the activities was really useful, and accessing that larger pool of opportunities should make it easier for them to match sessions with a user's need. And again, that potential of open data being something that can very quickly unlock lots of information about the activities that are actually happening, and hopefully provide a fuller picture rather than the current sort of business as usual, where often the information about what's happening locally is relatively small, and so it can be hard to actually match to what someone wants to do or is right for someone. And then third, the systems talked about, well, the kind of the speed and the potential for growing open data powered systems. So once a platform has implemented that ability to consume open data, the solution should be able to be delivered rapidly and at a relatively kind of lower cost than every time setting up a bespoke platform. So if you think you've got a system that's working in one area of London, you're using open data, you then go to another area, actually being able to switch on open data and pull it in could be a real kind of benefit in terms of quickly growing those kind of platforms in different areas. And as the number of open data powered platforms grow, the opportunity for referral service to integrate these platforms into their current processes increase. So we saw some benefits, but we also saw quite a few risks, and these were things that we kind of heard kind of strongly back from the service users, from the tech systems and also the link workers. So firstly, the data quality really came back as one of the real factors that was holding back open data work at the moment. So they were kind of finding inconsistencies in the content that was available in that data, which meant that actually it was kind of either unusable or kind of highly unuseful. And the key point from the tech systems point of view was link workers and then service users are likely to hold those platforms responsible for the data quality. So it's really imperative that the data quality is good enough standard for them to display. So we captured all those kind of data quality issues, and we've highlighted them in our report. Secondly, making it appealing to the service user. So they fed back that actually currently the open data feeds, the activities that were in there were not always kind of particularly relevant or visually appealing. Therefore, they might actually decrease the chance that a service user will be interested. And they kind of highlighted the dominance of sort of sporty content, words, images, things like body pump, considered to be actively disempowering and demotivating for many service users. Again, just kind of identifying that as it stands, the sessions that were coming through open data were maybe not a suitable fit for actually the service users they were supporting. And I guess, yeah, that kind of leads on to the number of referral ready activity providers. So link workers really require reassurance that activities, or as a kind of extension, the providers of those activities are of a sufficient quality, and there's a sufficient assurance around that. So currently there's a sort of severe lack of activity that's been designed primarily with the health benefit in mind. So in open data, there is a predominance of, we said, those sporty activities that anyone can attend. Actually, there is a slight dearth of the kind of really activities that link workers considered to be the ideal, things like walking groups, seated exercise, condition-specific programs. And also, service users want activities that are local to them. So they're often preferring activities that are within a sort of a 5 to 10 minute walk. However, when you go to a sort of a hyper local area, you're talking to a service user, you're looking at what's going on within the open data feeds, often actually referral ready activities within those areas were few and far between. So in summary, in terms of the business case question, we think that whilst there's a lot of potential, both referral services and platforms are not ready for full deployment, and particularly due to that kind of that lack of good quality data, which could really have an impact on that platform's reputation, and then actually it disincentivize referral services from using it. That felt to us one of the key things in terms of supporting tech systems to take this forward, was addressing that data. But we felt that there was that kind of strong appetite from referral services for that directory of service with multiple providers coming in, and we think that open data could be something that could help to resolve that, and that this project's taken a step in the right direction in terms of starting to explore how that business case could be developed in the future. The next slide. Again, quick reminder of the Slido and the code for that. If you've got any questions, the discussion will be coming after the next section. And again, any questions in there, then we'll be looking to get answers to. So in terms of concluding the project and looking at the learning that we got from the research we did, the 5 projects that we funded, the kind of feedback that we got from link workers and from tech systems, we've got a number of conclusions to those initial questions that we had. So the first one was around, does an open data powered solution make it easier for link workers to find a suitable activity session? But what we were able to show is that 4 services were successful in integrating an open data feed into their product. We know that Playways had already integrated that, so actually all 5 projects were using open data. We developed 6 functional developments, which received positive link worker feedback. So the video taster, the pathways functionality, Google Maps opening, the green light session. So some things that actually link workers felt was useful in helping them find a suitable activity session. And in general, the conclusion was that open data could support that. On the second question, which was around, does it actually lead to more people taking up activity or not? We simply weren't able to do that within the time period of the project and with the kind of the restrictions associated with COVID-19. We simply, one, ran out of time in terms of the development that we could do. So we funded the projects and they had 3 months to develop and test, which meant they simply couldn't get to the point where they developed it far enough to do real kind of get good data from users. And secondly, actually, the time that we've been running the project, there have been very few local activities actually operating, and actually lots of the interaction with link worker systems has been virtually, and essentially we weren't able to properly address that question, but we're taking this forward into our recommendations. So in conclusion, we think that the implementation of open data was feasible, and we generated some really kind of clear learning about the challenges of doing that. There was a broadly positive view of the potential and the kind of the specific functionality, how tech and open data might help meet some of those unmet needs that we generated, we think was there. And we had appetite from the tech systems to continue to work on this and to look at it as a solution that may in the future come in. But those specific concerns about data quality and quality assurance mean that as it stands, we don't think the tech systems are likely to develop it straight away, and that those challenges need to be overcome to make it work in the future. So onto our recommendations. So we took the conclusions to our advisory group, which was made up of a number of organisations from across the health, the community, the sport and physical activity, the open data sector, and looked at what learnings we've generated and how we might take them forward, both, I guess, as London Sport and as the wider people involved in the sector. So we came up with 3 overriding recommendations. So the first one was that physical activity opportunity data needs to be provided in a way that is usable by referral services. So much of the development of open active data and open data in general at the moment hasn't potentially been done specifically for its use in referral services. So in order to do that, we think that there are specific things that need to be addressed around the data quality in open active feeds. We think that there needs to be development of an approach that enables referral services to be confident in the quality and safety of a session or its provider organization. That quality assurance, that trust, that badge of kind of I am happy as a link worker to refer to something which I haven't personally been to and seen. We think that there should be a review, I guess, of the potential changes that could be made to the open active standards, which is the physical activity open data standards, based on some of the specific feedback we got. And one of those things that really came up was around the fact that referral services tend to use provider-centric directories. So they tend to sit with a user and go through a list of local providers, so Age UK or a local football club. And all of the open data at the moment from Open Active comes through on an event basis. So it says a football session on a Tuesday at 10 o'clock and a walking group on a Wednesday at 3 o'clock. So it was some specific looking at how actually providers and events are treated within both those systems. And then, as I said, kind of quite early on, one of the things that came out really strongly was this need to not only focus on sport and physical activity, and that link workers going forward would be unlikely to be just looking at a database of sport and physical activity opportunities. And actually, we think that it's really important that we identify an approach that would enable Open Active, which is sport and physical activity data, to integrate with the broader open referral UK standard, which is again something that is starting to be used around the use of community activities. And there is some existing work going on between Open Active and Open Referral, but we think this is kind of an important part of making sure that in the future, physical activity opportunity data comes through in a way that is usable by referral services. So our second recommendation was essentially that further testing and development of that open data business case and solutions needs to take place. So kind of essentially what we hope to have done within this project is that actually using and testing open data with end users, with service users, and seeing does it result in the kind of an impact on the quality and quantity of referrals, and that those kind of promising functional developments should be tested. So more looking at the taster video, etc., and the green light verification. More focus on working with activity providers to improve the quality of the data. So I guess looking at those barriers that are coming up against them, both to inputting data and not inputting it, and incentivizing that going forward. And looking at how can you better align what physical activity opportunities are happening with service user needs, such as their goals or their condition specific activities. One of the things we started to look at was the moving medicine program and how they at the moment will refer or have resources for health people involved in the healthcare system to try and match a particular condition that someone might have with suitable activity opportunities. And again, we think that's something that could be done to then and be applied to the data about those activities that are happening locally, and bringing that data in might make it again more usable. And number 3, the third one was around place-based open data activation approaches are needed. And again, kind of comes sort of full circle to what we had initially hoped to do with this project, in terms of going to an area and working with a number of local stakeholders to really test if this can work. So we say if a referral service is planning to use open data, then what they would need to do is really commit to working with multiple local stakeholders to identify and support activity providers to publish their opportunity data via open data compliance systems, so that there is a good supply of activities that are happening, and that kind of approach should be piloted in a specific locality, working with activity providers, referral services, service users, to really understand better the support that's required. And we think that actually through doing that, we'll have the opportunity to develop more of a business case and understand if it's something that can go forward from there. So those are our 3 overall recommendations. And I'm going to pass back to Tim, who's going to introduce the panel.
Thank you, Chris. So hopefully that was useful to give a broad overview and detail of the research. As Chris said, we'll share the full report and obviously these slides afterwards. So we've got about 30 minutes for a Q&A. We're going to spend about half that time for a panel discussion, and then the last part opening up to the questions that you've posed on Slido. If we don't get through them all, I'm sure we can provide written responses afterwards. So first off, I just wanted to introduce the panel briefly. So I'm going to ask each member, as I prompt them, to just introduce themselves, what organisation they represent. So first off, can I ask Tim Hill to introduce himself? I'm assuming Tim's on the call. Maybe not. Let's move on to Paulina from the GLA.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for introducing me. Yeah, my name is Paulina. I'm project manager at the community support team at the Mayor of London's office.
Great. And Fiona? Pretty sure Fiona was on the call. Just opening my chat to see if there's anything. No. Okay, so Sarah, hopefully you're on the call.
Yes, sorry. I thought I'd take my video off until introduced. So yeah, my name is Sarah. I'm Midlands Regional Lead for Social Academy, National Academy of Social Prescribing, apologies, based at Community Action Derby.
Great, thank you very much. And Chris is also joining us on the panel too. I assume the others will join us if they can, if they indeed can, and we'll do quick intros. If they indeed can join us. Paulina, I'll ask direct this question to you as the funder of the project. Where do you see it going next, and how do you think you can integrate the findings into any future work?
Thanks for this question. I mean, it's a good one, given that the project kind of had to pivot from delivery to a much more research focus. It's interesting how we can kind of work on the learning. So I think for me, it's three main areas where we can integrate and use these learnings in the future. So one, and I guess that's the slightly kind of less obvious one, is the learnings from the research piece, identifying the 11 unmet needs, are actually really helpful for us in terms of our future funding decisions. So we've just launched our Sport Unites Rolling Fund, and especially for the projects that are using sport to tackle an activity and to improve mental well-being, it would be really important to understand what defines a project from delivery perspective to be usable in a social prescribing or referral setting. So I think that's definitely one. And generally, the research into identifying what the persona of our social prescribing service user is really helpful. Then on a kind of broader scale, the learnings related to social prescribing overall are very valuable for the GLA work in general, and are currently being pulled into a wider piece of research, identifying again key success characteristics that would help us, making funding decisions in the future and defining the use of social prescribing in the future. And again, this falls in line with the Mayor's health and equality strategy, and hopefully this project will be able to feed into that. And then the last point, I guess, going forward, we are still committed to supporting social prescribing. We're still committed to using tech and data to enhance physical activity offer in London, but we will of course need to kind of see how these specific types of solutions could be integrated, because clearly some of the recommendations from this pilot show that the solutions are not necessarily ready for use just yet.
Yeah, thank you, Pauline. That's really helpful. Lots of potential, but more conversations to have and explore. Great. Okay. And I believe Fiona has been able to join us. She had a couple of tech issues, so maybe Fiona, can I just ask you to just briefly introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, my name is Fiona Kirkman. I'm a System Transformation Lead for Lewisham Health and Care Partners.
Great, thank you, Fiona. So I'm going to direct this next question to Chris, and it relates to the third recommendation, which was around place-based approaches. Chris, can you expand on what you think this may encompass in order to activate this sort of open data along the local ecosystem, and any thoughts about what London Sport and indeed our partners could do as a next step in this regard?
Yeah, so I think first thing to say is probably that the unmet needs document that we published can actually probably provide a nice starting point for those local discussions about making links between local health systems and local activity that's happening. And actually that those discussions probably need to start broader than looking specifically at open data as a potential solution. They really need to understand what is needed in the local area in order to do that. I think what we initially thought when we thought about this solution and how it might be used in a local area is that we could have open data and a referral system, rather than needing to employ a development worker to go out and find all the activities. We'd just be able to flick a switch on, the open data would flood in, and we'd have a great picture of what was going on locally. But I think the key thing is that we would suggest that you don't think like that when you're looking to do this in the future. If you are looking at open data, actually retain that resource, but focus it on continuing to identify the suitable local opportunities, building those kind of partnerships with those activities, and then simply using open data as potentially a way which you can easily facilitate the link between the activity provider and a system. So actually, yeah, concerted local effort needed to bring partners together, to identify suitable opportunities, to actually then bring those activity providers into the system, simply using open data to do that as one of the kind of most efficient ways. When you're then looking at that kind of open data bit, it is about the supply, but it's also making sure that it's good quality, that there is all those elements of welcoming information and the kind of the handover that an activity provider might be able to give in terms of accepting new people through a signposting or a referral. And I think probably importantly, that element around kind of trust or assurance. So what is the local assurance? So a discussion in a place would have to be around who do we trust? What is it? Providers of activity? Is it certain criteria? And how do we build that into a system that's using open data to ensure that we are happy with the quality assurance that comes through? And then on the kind of what systems are being used locally, it's looking at not only the referral system, but what are all the other sources of data that are out there that could potentially be pulled in together. We know that lots of areas have things like family service directories or directories of community services. And again, not just relying on activity providers directly uploading to an open data system, actually, what are the existing sources? How could they be joined up and brought in to provide that better picture? I think ultimately it's about finding a kind of a value exchange between where there are benefits for all parties in using open data to kind of support people into activity. In terms of what London Sport and partners are interested or could be doing, London Sport, we're certainly here to help partners understand the current status of open data, how it could be used, what the opportunities are there. I think we're really interested in exploring more that question around trust of data and quality assurance. I think if you look at something like Airbnb, which kind of launched, had 10 years, and after 10 years of being quite successful, finally started to go out and actually check, are the hotel rooms that people are booking actually there? Are they real? So I think it's something like a model that they've looked at is how can you actually build in some verification and quality assurance into the overall system. I think there's some interesting discussions there. And I think on a broader level, London Sport are certainly interested in supporting any areas to build physical activity links into health systems and looking at either a PCN area type approach where we can really understand what are the needs of an area and how can we support people to I guess, make better links into physical activity.
So what I'm hearing is like real life testing over a prolonged period of time within an area, which kind of takes into account all the complexity and different ways of working and needs of a whole raft of different stakeholders within that kind of referral sort of ecosystem. Yeah, I think for me it's generally that switch from that we had, which was thinking open data could be a flick a switch and it works, to actually no, it still required that resource and time and effort to get it working, but potentially in the future it could then be the thing that has the kind of the scalability and the cost effectiveness. It's that combination of use of relevant tech and digital approaches with community work, and you kind of need both, don't you? Absolutely. Cool. Good. Thank you. I'm going to move us on. Next question is initially targeted at Fiona. So this one explores the project a bit more broadly, and feedback from yourself and others working on this referral services is that the 11 unmet needs kind of really resonated with link workers and colleagues working in a referral sort of setting or context. Can you just touch on how you have used the 11 unmet needs to think more broadly about physical activity within your service?
Yeah, so I think, well, we had 3 Lewisham services actually participated in phase 1 of the project, and that was across different settings. One of them a home care agency, so an unusual different setting for us to start making physical activity referrals. So I think it was really good to get that feedback. So we're aware of many of the themes that were highlighted, I suppose, in the 11 areas of unmet need, and those that were identified. So particularly, latest information and the challenges we've heard around keeping that up to date in directories and that kind of thing, feedback on referrals. And of course, I think during pandemic, we've all seen the impact of digital exclusion. So I think that was something that we were clearly aware of. So when we saw the initial feedback and saw those 11 themes, they really did resonate with our social prescribing delivery group, and they felt it really got to the heart of the barriers to participation. And that was really where you could make a difference in terms of improving health and well-being. So that was something they wanted to look at seeing how we could address. Of course, there are ways that they link into the strategy, physical activity strategy, and how that will have an implication. But I think practically it's how we can use some of those themes and how we can learn from it. Looking at our group, for example, around how we can use taster sessions, warm handovers to develop. And I think seeing in the demonstration in the films a really good example. In Lewisham, we've got the Borough of Culture coming up next year. So we're starting, thinking about how we can have taster sessions using film, introducing people, thinking about how you can use roles like community champions to do some of this work. But it's really, as you say, it's about how these 11 areas have a wider application, particularly, and how we can begin to get some clear actions to develop those and perhaps embed them in not just social prescribing pathways, but other areas. And I think, as Chris was just saying, looking at how we can embed them in a health system to improve local health and well-being.
Great, no, that's really fantastic that they resonated, which gives us some confidence going forwards, I guess. So, and the next question really builds on that notion. So, Sarah, so thinking about the 11 unmet needs, do they potentially provide a framework for organisations to collaborate on? I guess is an initial kind of thought. But and can you share your thoughts on the possible benefits of collectively working together to move the physical activity referral agenda along?
Yes, happy to comment on that. So I could definitely see crossovers between sort of the work that's been shared here about the unmet needs and also what I'm hearing across the Midlands and some organisations that have been part of that whole referral agenda. But I think seeing similarities across projects with the view that there are these barriers that have been well identified in the 11 unmet needs. So I think collaborating could really help sort of focus and pool our collective resources. So that's how I would like to see sort of us move forward, sort of adding to this body of work. And I guess I'm coming more from the perspective of hearing activity providers who offer something different. So it expands that sort of physical activity to arts for health and well-being, green space, etc. So it could really then strengthen that whole referral agenda. Yeah, I could expand a little bit more, but I can leave it there, whichever's best.
We've got time, so if feel free to shed any further light on that.
Okay, brilliant. So I think the concept of the referral, I guess I'm looking at very much in the social prescribing remit, and I think with particular focus on it being person-centred, and I think a lot of these ideas that come through the unmet need has subsequently supported a very person-centred approach. And I really think the reflection that Chris was just saying about it's not to replace the relationships, but how can tech support the relationships? How can you then collate that information effectively? So what work we've been doing in the Midlands a little bit more on the, I guess, giving the third sector a sort of voice in their different areas of expertise. So finding a way of expressing the information that's relevant for their group. And I think it really shone out in your presentation where if I had my arts for health and well-being hat on, that sort of level of intensity is very much a physical activity, but we've got a different one for the sort of emotional needs of someone. So how do we articulate that, and what does that look like? So I think there's an element of the quality assurance as well, where I've been talking to Charities for Excellence framework that sort of shifts away from a tick box kind of exercise of quality assurance to a tool that can sort of support organisations to develop their work, and so I'm really interested in kind of a more empowered way of supporting the groups that can provide provision for referral, and it not be heavily reliant on someone kind of assessing and ticking boxes, I guess, on terms of what is needed. But that piece of work equally needs developing alongside these conversations. And I definitely think kind of automatically mapping and checking through that accuracy and data information is definitely a strength we can all kind of link in with, even if they all play a slightly different part in focus, whether it's the activity provision or the quality assurance, etc. So that's where I'm particularly sitting at the minute. And I think just a quick point that, you know, money often is brought up as a major barrier to having referrals for organisations to then utilise. And I think kind of money's a funny one in the sense of how much information do you give about the finance of something, and how much is it about understanding that provision and actually having the understanding that if it's actually the best provision, that's financially going to be the best, works out eventually in the end. But I think there's a whole culture that we're having to kind of shift a lot of historical thinking around. So I think we've got a lot on our hands, but I'm really hopeful about the 11 unmet needs and how you've managed to really get to the crux of some of these things, and we can look at some practical ways forward together.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. I've got a question which I'm going to pose, but not necessarily ask for a reply, because I'm keen to get to the audience's questions. But I guess there's something for me, possibly for you, Sarah, possibly for Chris, I'm not sure. But how do partners sort of practically collaborate on this agenda if they're not sure which forums or networks or who to speak to? So just maybe give that a bit of thought. So I'll draw that panel's discussion, or at least the initial session, to a close and open it up to the audience. So I don't know if I can see these questions or not. I think they're going to come up here. So this is obviously a reminder. I can see the questions, which is really helpful. So I'm going to just run through some of these and just invite panel members to give an initial response if they could. So the first one being, how can activity providers be incentivized to share their activities using open data? It's an extra resource requirement when money is really tight. Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because you know, that kind of activity sort of supply challenge came out in the research as kind of the, you know, one of the bigger barriers. So I don't know if anybody wants to take that question on.
I'm happy to comment into that space. So one of the pilots for green space in Nottingham are trialling a different way of working in terms of funding the sort of third sector providers, actually having a conversation with sort of a local infrastructure organisation like a CVS, where they can actually sort of commission. So for example, having a bigger say in commissioning to start with is what's being explored a little bit in terms of how do we make that shift, rather than taking the approach historically of let's just research gaps and then put money into gaps. Actually, how do we create a framework that is more responsive to the needs that a person has in that very moment, and it's not something resolved, unfortunately. It's something being explored with different providers, and different pilots are taking place. It's definitely a space that's changing, but is constantly coming up as an issue. So I'm just sort of flagging that is being heard and is being explored, but just keep reminding us partners to do that. We might have more updates.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to come in on that?
Yeah, just a very quick addition, I guess, thinking about it again from grant funding perspective. We can definitely incentivize activity providers to, well, share their activities or post session information, especially if it's part of their recruitment kind of strategy for service users. I think for me, the different question there that's more tricky to answer is how do we do it sustainably and on a prolonged basis, which I think was an issue in one of the pilots with the green ticked activities. How do we ensure that people have the resource and the incentive to do it on a sustained basis rather than as one-off?
Yeah, agreed. That's the challenge. So actually, I might just pose the third question because it kind of links as well to that in terms of, Chris, you might be the best to answer this one about, have we done any testing with the activity providers?
So I think that was something that kind of just fell slightly out of scope of this particular element of the project, but it's absolutely something that we should be, I guess, taking forward in terms of really understanding from their point of view, actually, what is it like to receive people who have been signposted or referred directly? What is that process like for them, and how can that best be supported? So I think that will be a key area to understand as we go forward.
Yeah, okay, good. And then could you say something, I assume, Chris, it's probably best you answer this in terms of your knowledge of the project, but how we ensure, in terms of quality assurance of those sessions?
Yeah, so I think so Waltham Forest was a good example where they had a local standard, which the digital co-production referred to in the video, and essentially digital co-production were able to take that and then translate that into what criteria in the open data needed to be selected. So they pressed the kind of quality assurance button, it selected a number of items within the data. We can get hold of that and share that as part of their case study. And that was then able to filter those sessions out to say, actually, these are the ones that meet our quality assurance. The other things that we tested as part of this were, one was the kind of how up to date is that information. The link workers kind of told us that one of their real issues was they'd have a list of local activities, they'd go to signpost someone to it. Before they could signpost them, they'd have to call up and try and find the session, and more often than not, that session wasn't running anymore. So one of the key bits of data that we looked at within open data was, what was the date that the session was last updated? Was it within a week, within 30 days? And that's one of the kind of specific things that we think going forward is really important to do. The other thing that came up was around, I guess, trusting trusted partners, or then trusting other people who have trusted people. So link workers said, well, if there's an activity that's delivered by the Bromley and Bow Centre, that's fine. Like I trust the Bromley and Bow Centre, so I trust their activities. Another route was, well, if the council has funded something, or if the council as a local organisation is promoting something, then again, we trust the council has some quality assurance in place. So any activities that are kind of flowing through that way could be trusted. So all of these things are stuff that's not kind of specifically encoded within the data at the moment, but they are things that could be explored and identify ways to do that. And I think the important thing is those are all things that potentially you could scale. The other thing to say is, maybe there isn't a really kind of easily scalable way that you can do this without actually continuing with real people verifying sessions, and that might be something that needs to happen. Again, as I might kind of reference in terms of Airbnb and other platforms, they really are doing lots of on the ground stuff, employing people to really understand and verify sessions or verify bookings, etc., to make sure that quality is there, because going forward that will be the ultimate thing that kind of makes things fail or succeed, is around the quality of sessions, and people can trust what they're seeing.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That's really helpful. The next question is around, I think, the relevance of the data to the actual service user as opposed to the, I guess, the link worker. And I'm not sure what if it's a specific question, but does anyone have a sense of, I guess this project's really focused on the needs of the referral agency, well, both really, but perhaps principally the link worker and the referral agency. But do you feel this has an application for the service user directly as well? So into, I guess, direct referrals possibly. Don't know if anyone's worked in that space yet or wants to comment.
I'm not sure whether I've fully understood, Tim. So I think there's an answer, and I don't want to kind of go off on a tangent, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, okay. I think, yeah, okay. I guess the question is, or maybe there's no question there. Is more of a comment about the motivation or the different barriers perhaps that a service user might face to actually really using this unless prompted by the link worker. Maybe that's what the referral service is there for, in a sense. So if someone wants to to expand on that, then that's that's fantastic. Whoever posed a question as well, please come in.
I did put the question up there. So hi, Amanda Chambers. I am program manager for Green Space in Nottinghamshire, which is a GSP program. Yeah, it was just, and it may have been confusion on my part, but when I was looking at some of the videos, it looked like they were making selections on the type of activity they want to do, and I couldn't see a patient or an individual actually using that themselves, because typically the people who go to link workers can't make those decisions, or that they need that support and help to do that, and actually they wouldn't know what a lot of that terminology meant anyway if they were inactive. So you can talk about, oh, come along and do core work. Well, they won't know what core work is. So I just wondered whether this is predominantly for link workers rather than being a self-service option. And so I suppose that was what I was, so it was a comment and a question at the same time, really.
Yeah, I think I can add
and also about digital exclusion, obviously, which is a massive issue.
Yeah, I guess just from the background behind why we mainly kind of focus on this route was that there is, I guess, quite a lot of existing user or person-focused activity finders and websites where you can find activities and lots of that kind of work. And what we really felt was they're great for people who are looking for it or who are really ready to get started, but actually there's a whole load of people who are not even really considering it and not ready, but actually those are people who are accessing things like link worker services. And in those moments when a link worker is supporting them to explore what might be right for them, then for the link worker to have that at their fingertips and within the system that they're using was really the key. So yeah, so these absolutely were integrations within link worker systems that hopefully sort of fit with what they were doing. But I would say that there's valid points there in terms of, one, the wording and how that is translated. And I think there was another question again around like a dictionary of terms that are used. So I think that is something that could broadly be explored, and how link workers do talk about or can talk about activity and make it seem attractive, how that could then be translated into the data. But yeah, I guess also when you are having a discussion with someone and they're starting to think about being active, how do you help them to then kind of take the lead and make those decisions? Because we know it's not a link worker saying you should go to this activity. It really is a sort of a person who's making that decision themselves. So I think, yeah, how you almost support the link worker to help them have that conversation, but then how do you empower the user to make the decision of what they want to do and take that forward?
Thanks, Chris. I think we've got time for just two more questions. I think the next one is quite straightforward. But did we test non-formal activities, i.e. not instructor-led movement opportunities such as walking routes, for example?
So we didn't within this. We kind of focused specifically on the activities that would be being delivered either kind of locally or potentially virtually, activities, sessions that were taking place at specific times, because that's how I guess the open data at the moment is structured, and that's where we think there is a gap. I could point you to like good examples, like in Kent, they've got Everyday Active, a website which social prescribers are using, and it has really good content around walking, cycling, how to get into all those activities and all the resources to help people build confidence. So that's one of the things that kind of didn't fit within our project, but absolutely is a thing that a referral service needs to consider in terms of when they are looking at how do we support people best into activity. We know what we were doing here with sessions is actually only a really tiny percentage of people who are interacting with link workers are going to be ready to attend an in-person session. So what are the other opportunities that could be almost like gateways to doing that? And those are things that, yeah, would also need to be built in.
Great, thank you. I think the next two, or certainly around sort of data standards, and appreciate we don't have Tim Hill from Open Active on the call, but I wonder if perhaps Chris, you could just touch on sort of the open data standards, and whether there's any sort of alternatives apart from sort of the open data at present.
I mean, I guess just a flag that we, in our part of our research for this, we talked to some other active partnerships in areas of the country who were doing similar projects, just not using open data. They were creating a local set of criteria about information they needed about activities. They were capturing that information, and then they were making sure that was shared in a format, and that was particularly a printed document. but I guess it came down to that local decision around what information was needed. And again, that's where we think that the unmet needs can be a starting point to have local areas exploring what do we need to put in place in order to make a better links to local activities.
Good. I'm going to have to draw a close there. There's some questions there which we haven't answered, so perhaps we can share a form of a response, certainly from our perspective, with the presentation. So many thanks to the panel for your contribution, and indeed people posing their questions. That's really, really helpful. So just to finalise, if we can just move on. So we'll share, as I said, share the report. All of the reports are available via that link. If you would like further conversations, then please do get in touch with us. If it's more on the kind of data, open data side of things, contact my colleague Oliver. If it's more on the sort of referral, physical activity, social prescribing type context, please do contact Rob McLean. So all that leaves us with is to say a huge thank you to everybody. Thank you for your interest. We are obviously really interested in the next stages about what we can do and how we can collaborate. So that's actually a question we didn't get a chance to ask or find the answer out to. So again, maybe we'll just put some thoughts on in a written response back to you. So yeah, many thanks, and do get in touch with us if you're interested in the findings or want to explore and have further discussions about this topic. Enjoy your rest of your sunny afternoons, and thanks for your time.